Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to turn our attention towards installing Motormount, bulkheads and upper decks on your Awesomatix A800R. We're going to start by checking the fitment of the upper deck on the Motormount to make sure the upper deck can swivel freely around the STO19 screw. This pointer wall is already covered in a previous YouTube short and also on Instagram and Facebook with the reels. But sometimes out of the box the upper deck is slightly bindy like so. So we're gonna slightly bevel the upper deck, the hole with the 90-degree end mill like so. Just by hand, just remove a little bit of material. Just to make sure the upper deck can freely swivel around the screw. So for this setup, as I mentioned in the previous video, we are building the car with the recommended carpet setup from the Awesomatix Discord, and the upper deck comes obviously uncut, but the setup calls for a fully cut, as we like to call it, front upper deck. So it's cut the first two notches and also in between the B and the C screw. So I'm not gonna cut it on video, it's a messy process. Don't like doing it indoor because of the carbon fiber dust. So I have already a pre-cut upper deck. Same process, just checking if it fits properly and it swivels around the screw. Yes, you see this one is actually perfect. So put them aside for now. And we can install the pulley on the Motormount. I like to put a drop of oil on the bearings. I'm gonna use this MXLR bearing oil. Just a drop on each bearing. Sometimes they come a little bit dry out of the factory, so just making sure I'm not running into any problems. And because the bearing is held, well, the whole pulley assembly is held with a very small screw, it's an M2.5, sorry, I like to use a very small drop of thread lock. So I don't have to use too much force for tightening it. Check for free movement and we can move on. Installing the belts. Similar process for the anti-skid bearing, just a little bit of oil. And as per the manual, the 0.5 shim first, then bearing, and the 1 mil shim at the end. Just making sure we didn't pinch the belts too much. That's perfect. Moving on, we can install the motor mount onto the chassis. So note the two pins. Find the location on the chassis. Grab a 5 mil flathead screw. And this setup also calls for only two screws, number 3 and 4. But to make sure we're gonna install the motor mount perfectly straight, I'm gonna use the number 1 screw as well. So first we go finger tight. make sure there is no resistance and everything is lined up perfectly. And we can go fully tight and then remove the most forward screw, knowing that the motor mount is perfectly straight. For the next stage, and like specified by the manual, I like to remove the arms at this stage and save them for later. I'd rather install the hubs on the arms separately, so we can make actually do a better job at doing so. So for this stage, we're gonna focus solely on installing the bulkheads and the upper decks and making sure our frame is perfectly straight and square. It's gonna make the rest of the build easier. Put the arms aside like so, and we're gonna take care of the bulkheads. Very important, don't forget at this stage to install the ST24 on the rear bulkheads. This is where the toe link is gonna mount. There's gonna be a bit of resistance on these screws, that's normal. And also make absolutely sure you find the difference between ST24, which is a 4.8mm ball, and ST03, which is the 5mm ball. These are only used for the hubs, and you can see they have a slightly different shape. One has a slight chamfer and the other is not chamfered and straight. So again, for the bulkheads, no chamfer, ST24. And similarly, the screws that mount the bulkheads are not the same as the Motormount. They are machine screw, and you can notice the little step just below the head of the screw. So for now we just go finger tight. That is, I like to go like to the contact and back off the screw just slightly to allow some play in the bulkhead for now. Moving on, we grab the front upper deck, that's the cut one. And for the upper deck screws in the kit, you find this button head 5mm screw, but as an option you can get the better aluminium Awesomatix screw. It's a machine screw, also with a small step. So it has a snug fit on the holes of the top deck to make sure everything is absolutely centered and squared. Very highly recommended. But for the purpose of this build, we're gonna use the kit screws. And similar to the flathead screws, we are going finger tight for now. And we're gonna give everything a bit of a wiggle, make sure everything finds its place. And with one hand, we're gonna maintain the chassis flat on the board. And with the inertia of the wrench, we're gonna just allow the screws to go in contact and do the same at the bottom. And this alone should get you pretty close to having a square car already. But with the caliper, I'm gonna check the gap between the bulkheads to make sure they are fairly aligned. The value you're looking for is just below 23 mil. And I'm just checking the gap between the front and the rear part of the bulkhead to check if they are parallel or twisted or just out of square. So far they're perfect. And I'm gonna do again the upper deck screw just to make sure I'm releasing any tension that would be left over. And from then on I can go fully tight. Now we could either be happy and move on and consider our chassis to be flat. However, it's always a good idea to make sure the front and the rear part of the chassis are perfectly parallel, so you can check on the board, but these set of boards are never fully flat. So you can also check on the glass board and listen for any out of shape chassis, but even better will be to grab a twig station set it straight with the glass board see the bubble and check the complete frame on its own on the twig station, and now we know for sure we've done a perfect job with the frame assembly. And voila, this is it, a perfectly straight frame, ready to move on to the next stage of the build. Hope you guys liked it and see you guys in the later video. Ciao ciao.